Canberra Chess Club Championship 2022, Round 2. The good, the bad, the ugly. How I fell asleep at the wheel. This game was a good game in some respects. I played in a straightforward, simple way. I was too tired, exhausted, to be calculating complex, detailed lines. In doing so, I did amass a good position and put my opponent under lots of steady pressure, and he buckled hard. I won a clean knight on the back of his mistake and had an unbelievably solid and easy position to play. Yet, I allowed him back into the game through a series of mistakes that, from a computer's perspective, still left me in a position where I was absolutely overwhelming him. But from a human perspective, it gave him a tiny bit of hope, and me, increasing feelings of discouragement. My lackluster play in the endgame resulted in a drawn position where I tried to play on, pressing him to make one more blunder, begging the chess god to forgive me. And when he did, I was so low on time, so tired and so internally defeated that I failed to find how I could punish his mistakes. So we maneuvered round in a drawn position, me with a rook, he with a bishop, and eventually, sensing the ticking of the clock and the bored groans of the remaining audience, traded my rook for his bishop and left our two kings on the board alone, with no more fight to give. A draw that felt more like a loss, but goes to prove the saying an old chess friend taught me, which is that chess is hard. This game started with e4, c5, the Sicilian. I played the first few moves on autopilot as I am familiar with them, famous as they are. Still, by move 4, I did not know the best move, and opted to castle, as it seemed to me impossible that it could be a bad move, even if it wasn't best. Computer says, in fact, it was the best. Hooray! On knight f6, I thought a long time on e5. Being in the mood, however, for simple play and not wanting to calculate the consequences of potentially becoming overextended, I opted for the simple rook e1, developing, defending, and remaining flexible. On queen c6, I just remember thinking that he has no threats of mate on h2, because my knight on f3 guards it well. Therefore, I'm not afraid of any potential knight g4 ideas. I also thought that if I played d4, it would give him a chance to utilize his dark squared bishop to more of a degree, which I decided to avoid. I wanted to keep him cramped up and ideally unable to castle. From there, I'd try to open up the center and kill him while his king was still there, exposed. Again, I thought of e5, but the complications were too much for me to handle, so I played another developing move, defending my bishop and disallowing him to play d5. For if d5, I'd take, and my rook on e1 and the pin it creates gives me a large advantage. On a6, I had to avoid the traps associated with bishop a4. I thought about trading the bishop for his knight, but just on principle, decided to preserve my bishop pair. Again, no calculation for this chess player tonight. On knight e5 I took because I liked the way my position was starting to unfurl into a solid, well-developed structure against his vagabond of a queen and, as yet, uncastled king. I felt this was going my way, and yes, indeed it was. Sure, he would have some queenside play, but I have everything else in my favour. On queen retreating to c7, I could no longer resist e5. It either kicks the knight back to its home square, which further delays his castling, or brings it forward, whereupon I can occupy e4 with my knight, and it's a very stable knight there. Meanwhile, I can harass his knight and continue my development and plan of opening the centre. This was all I wanted. It turns out there were better moves, like taking the knight and playing f5, steamrolling through the centre. And given that this was my plan, I really should have seen that. Nonetheless, the way I played was still solid, and I retained a good advantage and an easy position. I kicked his knight around a bit, and then developed my bishop with a tempo against his c5 pawn, not seeing any way for him to defend it. He found one though. He played his knight to a5, which struck me as odd and awkward. The computer agrees, thinking my advantage is now becoming very significant. I now envisioned checking him, recapturing his bishop with my pawn, which attacks his queen, and after his queen moves, either skewering it to his rook with my light squared bishop, after first preparing that skewer with g3, or possibly playing b4 if he puts the queen on the wrong square, with some kind of a double attack against his knight and the pawn, which would be pinned. However, I then noticed that g3 would allow bishop b7, and his threat of mate becomes hard to defend, and he would be the one with the large advantage. But since I saw it, I didn't go that way. Instead, I tried to set the skewer up in a more simple way, and in a way that, whether the skewer worked or not, would improve the meek position of my light squared bishop. On queen b6, I knew he was busted. This was a move I'd seen a few moves back. I'd seen that queen b6 would work in my favour, and here is why. b4. b4 attacks the knight and attacks the pawn. The pawn can't move, for it would lose the queen to my bishop. Therefore the knight must move, and after that I can capture the pawn and open the position simultaneously, which is exactly what I did. He decided to recapture the pawn with his knight, and I noticed that this move gave me the opportunity to double attack his knight on the one hand and his b7 pawn on the other in one foul swoop. Hence, queen d4. It was at this stage that I knew that I was going to win this game. I had pressed him consistently with not the best, but solid moves, and he had slipped and buckled hard. Before I took his knight, I did consider playing one of the rooks to b1, which would have been a bit better, but also more complex, and once again, I played to win in a fashion that didn't involve complex thoughts. So I just took the knight, we traded queens, and the position simplified greatly in my favour. There was no way I could lose this battle. I didn't have to think anymore at all, and so I turned my mind off and went on autopilot mode. Big mistake. The first big manifestation of my lack of conscious decision making was when, after he played g5, I took it. My whole entire plan had been based on preventing him from castling by keeping him busy with other threats, and then opening the centre and slaying his unprotected king. Now that I had achieved this goal, with an extra piece to boot, I should have absolutely kept my king side of the board locked up and opened up the centre as I'd planned, with f5. This would have made it practically impossible for him to keep on playing on. There just would be no hope at all. A waste of time. He'd probably soon throw in the towel, resign, and just go home. Instead, after I took, and he recaptured with his rook, he opened up that tiny but powerful characteristic that dwells inside the human heart called hope. It only takes a sliver to call a person forward and to draw them onward through the storm, to keep on battling. He now had hope, invested in the G2 square, upon which now converged the open lines of his rook and bishop. I was so smug, and playing so fast at this point, that I didn't even stop to think about G2. I played C5 immediately and thought nothing of him playing F5 in return. It never even crossed my mind that G2 was hanging. And though he missed it the first time, after I played rook E5, missing it for a second time, he took his chance and acted on his hope. Bishop takes G2. Well, bugger me. Here was me thinking I was creating an artwork for my YouTube channel. And now I've gone and spilt my coffee all over it. I screwed it up. I'm negative self-talking now. Despite the fact that after King F2, I'm still destroying him. Here was me thinking, I'm a chess master in the making. But here's the cold, hard truth. I still allow moves like bishop takes G2. Twice. I feel like a loser. I force a rook trade and capture the F5 pawn. My position is still abundantly amazing, yet I'm beginning to feel and play like a lost cause. I retreat my pieces to safe positions and defend my H2 pawn. I want to just consolidate and try to press out for the victory that I feel I'm entitled to. I don't want to earn it anymore. I just want it given to me somehow. I'm like a bratty little kid throwing a temper tantrum on the board. On rook a4, I see that I can trap his rook and wind up in an endgame where I have a rook and a pawn versus his bishop, which should be winning easily. I also notice that I can check his king backwards before going into that plan, and that's exactly what I do. We reach the envisioned endgame, where I indeed am far superior to him. Now give me my due win. Don't make me think. I cut his rook off with one bishop, attack it with another, forcing the aforementioned trade, and then I set about mobilizing my pawns toward their queening squares. All perfect moves by the computer's standard. He does the same. His tiny, shimmering sliver of hope, outshining my depths of despair. I still have a whopping advantage, but I just can't shake that sense that I've screwed up, that I've failed. And now I'm playing out that failure like a car crash in slow-mo. I think I see a tactic whereby once I queen on d8 and he captures with his king, I'll be able to pin and win his bishop, completely overlooking that his bishop is protected by the c6 pawn, which I therefore decide to take and feel even more like a failure, despite the fact that still the computer says I have a crushing advantage. I take his g5 pawn and realize I can beat his king to the corner and therefore have a good chance of promoting my h pawn in the future. I play the completely unnecessary rook e1. Unnecessary because if he ever were to promote that pawn, as long as I have a rook on the back rank, I would simply take the newly promoted queen. And he can never support the promotion of the pawn with his bishop because his bishop is of the wrong color. He then plays king e8. Do I play the obvious and previously intended king g7? No. That would not fit with my thoughts of myself as a failure and a lost cause. I leave that square for him and his bright, strong, shining hope, albeit false. I play h4 instead, immediately, a dangerous thing to do. I finally realize that my rook need not remain on e1, so I try to cut his king off from the corner with one last attempt. After bishop e3, I play h5, continuing my trudge towards failure, the trudge I wholeheartedly believe in. h5, as it turns out, is the only move since move 7 where I've done anything to leave him with an actual chance of securing a draw. Now, though, he sees what he must see in order to secure the draw. The hope that kept him living through the loss of his knight, the trade of our queens, and all the rest of it, is now within his grasp. And I too am now tasting viscerally the loss and shame of my regret. After king h8 and rook a7, I feel I may have a slight chance at victory. He may have done this wrong. And indeed, that is the case. Move 71, I am considering the obvious king f6 for a while, but it doesn't fit with my loser mentality. So I go for the speculative h7 instead. Surely, there goes my last chance for the win. Now, it's a draw again. I play king h6, and he surprises me with bishop g6. I stop and think that if I take the bishop, he queens, and if I take his queen, it's stalemate. I compliment him internally for that lovely idea. Also, if I take the pawn, as I did, he takes my pawn, and when my rook returns, it's rook versus bishop, which is also bound to be a draw. Again, I compliment him internally. At no stage does it occur to me that the move he played, which surprised me because it is a shockingly bad move. I needed only play rook g7, and now, if he moves to get a queen, I mate him on g8. If he moves his bishop away, I mate him on g8. And if he takes my pawn, I take the bishop with check, and once his king moves, I go after his other pawn, take it, and then mate him simply with my king and rook. That's all I had to do. But no, I really don't feel like a winner this evening. I'm tired. I'm done. I don't want to think anymore. I lost it back when I let him take on g2, despite the fact that the computer says I'm still crushing him there. I'm still crushing him all the way up until my move h5. g2 was when I lost this game in my own mind. Despite the fact that this game was a draw, g2 was where I lost in my own mind. I took his pawn and went through the motions of hoping he would make some kind of terrible blunder and give his bishop away for free, allowing me to mate him. He didn't. That was such a remote possibility that not even hope could be of use. I got to a position where I could trade off my rook for his bishop and leave our two kings standing there, exposed but unable to fight, weary, opposed to one another, but with nothing left to give. A draw from a computer's standpoint, but a loss from my own human perspective. I want to be the kind of player that does not make such mistakes. In truth, even the best in the world make these errors. The difference is, they then compose themselves. They then regain the sense that they are the champion. They're not invincible. They can get hit and hurt. A sword can pierce their skin. Their pants can fall around their ankles and expose themselves unwittingly to a laughing and mocking audience. But what makes them the best is that they don't let that stop them. They accept failure and defeat. They allow room in their minds and hearts for small or large disappointments. They integrate those hurts and sorrows and absorb them in a way that makes a bigger and stronger beast, which they then use to hit back at their opponent with twice the force, 10 times the force that they themselves were just hit with. As Rocky Balboa famously says, it ain't about how hard you get hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward. With that in mind, I will move forward in this championship. I'm going to prove my worth. Come back next week for round 3 of the Canberra Chess Club 2022 Championship. You're following Michael Boo. I'm now on 1.5 points through the first 2 rounds, with 7 rounds to go. Till next time, take care of yourselves and others and keep moving forward.